Today on Pro Mindset, I have my lovely daughter, Rylee. Rylee, why don't you share for our audience what you're doing these days?
Amazing. Good to be here with you, Dad. Um, I am an astrologer, an akashic channel, and an energy healer. I do retreats and I work one-on-one with clients. So a lot of the work I do, I call it inner gold alchemy because I believe all of us have this treasure within us. And through the process of alchemizing our pain into our purpose, we're able to discover the gifts we are here to give the world.
Okay, that's a lot right there, Rylee. So let's dive into that. Well, first, let's talk about this. We've got Pro Mindset,
Yes.
and you've been a big part of the boys' success in football because you've been one of their major confidants, and you've been like a mental coach for them from time to time, helping them get unstuck, helping them, make a transition through a tough spot, help them kind of process their circumstances a little bit differently than perhaps they could see it being who they are in the situation they're in. So kind of share for our audience your perspective on sports, your history with our family, being an athletic family, and you choosing to do, Miss Indiana, and, performing arts and dancing and singing and all those things.
Yeah. Our family is definitely a sports family. That is like the framework and the fabric of how we relate and really how we see the world is through the lens of sports. I think it's always been really powerful to witness you and Mom both working in the same field, but almost on like different sides of the same industry. And then with the boys, obviously both playing football, but very different positions. Brock playing quarterback, Johansson playing linebacker, defense, and honestly anywhere they'll put him. Brock always being quarterback, Dojo always being in flow on the field, being in transit and used in different ways and capacities. I think for me, like I do have a heightened sensitivity and creativity that desired to be expressed more from feeling that lended itself to artistry. So I never had the spirit of sport. You actually have told the story on your podcast of when I was playing soccer and it was finally competitive and I made the last team and I was a goalie on the last team, which is pretty grim. And when the ball wasn't on my side of the field, I would look up at the sky. I was kind of dancing, twirling. And I would say that that's very symbolic of kind of how I felt navigating the realm of sports. But I love passion and I love what people's dharma is, what their purpose is. And it's so clear within our family that sports is a huge part of that. And it's a platform for who each and every one of you, Mom, Brock, and Johansson, who you are as people and the message you're here to share. And that's translated so powerfully through sports. So watching you as a mentor and a guide, as an agent, and not just doing your job, but actually going the extra mile always to be a father figure, to be a guide, a support system for all of your athletes. And I think when it comes to my perspective, contributing is I always had a different viewpoint because I was never immersed in sports. And because sports is not where my passion lies, I almost could view a game or an experience from a bird's eye view, from a spiritual perspective. And I think that can be really helpful for Johansson and Brock, especially right now, where they're receiving so much feedback from their coaches, from the communities that they're in, from their teammates, that is all through the lens of sports. And I can lend a different perspective that's more spiritual, that's maybe more universal, and help them to see things a little bit differently when they're in a tough spot.
So let's talk about how you've helped one of the boys. Just pick an example, Brock or Jojo, where they were in a tough spot And because of your perspective, because of your experience, because you're not, you have a 30,000 foot view potentially, how you helped them.
So what comes to mind is the times that I have channeled for them or done energy work on them and been able to see how they participate in sports from a spiritual perspective. Because sports are really spiritual, and being willing to put your body through really modern warfare. This is like the modern gladiators, the modern Colosseum, and to be in view and have all of these spectators around you projecting their emotion, their perspective, their desires onto you being on the field. I think I've really helped them to understand their role as being a participant in the arena. I think that's so much about what pro mindset is getting in the arena and thinking and operating like a pro rather than a spectator of your life. And I think because I'm a conscious spectator who's not projecting my hopes and dreams into a game or desiring an outcome other than the highest outcome for my brothers, but just objectively, like I never sit down and watch a game and have an opinion about it. I think that higher perspective has helped them to understand their deeper why and their deeper mission to why they play football and how it connects them to the divine and their purpose and their mission after football as well, which I think when you're connected to that deeper why, it frees up the pressure on the field and in this season of life when they are in the arena, because they understand that this is temporary and it's leading them to a greater and greater and greater mission, and that it's only going to keep getting better rather than football is the glory days of their life.
Share for the audience what channeling means.
So there's a quantum field, field of love, information field. And when I channel, it's almost like I tune into this field, and it's almost like I'm scrolling through the Instagram feed of your soul. And so there's images, there's videos, there's messages. Sometimes there's really long captions, and sometimes it's just like little blips of facts, like you need to drink alkaline water, or your body's struggling with iron, you should take an iron supplement. And it can be really like quick, or we can dive really deep into imagery, into mission, into purpose. That tends to be what I channel for people, is their soul gifts, their purpose, what they're here to do. Oftentimes what will come through is dreams they've never even felt confident enough to voice to other people, or perspectives of who they are, what they do, that maybe they haven't felt like there's a safe space for them to share that, and it just is in their field. So it's less about new information coming in and more about divine confirmation. So let's say, for example, someone wants to write a book, and I'm channeling for them, and I'm like, oh, you're a writer, and there's this book that wants to come through, and like, this is what it's about. And then they just feel so affirmed. And that's the deeper goal of channeling, is not to predict or project or even direct the energy, but rather reflect that person's field, their heart, their deepest desires, their purpose, their mission back to them, so that they feel that affirmation and that like divine confirmation that this is who they are and this is what they're meant to do, and they can move forward confidently in that.
Well, I think a lot of athletes, the higher they get, and professionals too, in all different arenas, they're told who they are.
Right.
And, you know, athletes, football players especially, are told every day by the media and by their coaches and by their fans who they are. So how do you balance out the internal and the external stimuli that these guys get from, you know, helping them understand that what's likely way more important than anything is the inside game, not the outside game? What is your perspective on that?
I actually really like this question, because we have so many different aspects of self. And so there's the eternal essence, the unchanging, deeper part of who we are, our soul. And that is unwavering. It existed. It's an energy that existed before we incarnated into a body, and it will continue after we leave. But then in this life, we also have an ego. And this is our settings of what we like and our preferences and our personality. And sometimes what happens is people throw themselves so into their eternal essence that the ego goes away and they kind of lose their magnetism. That's where you see like monks or people in an ashram, like they're devoted to service. They're not necessarily a public figure. But when we're talking about athletes, the ego is very important because that's part of what makes a person magnetic, is their preferences, is that zing that they have. But that gets really out of balance when they're not connected to their soul, to their eternal essence. So it's really about learning how to harness the power of the ego to be in service to the soul so that you can not only make an impact in the world, which is what the ego wants you to do, but then it be a deeper impact than just self-serving, which is what the soul wants you to do.
That's pretty powerful. So talk about how you help your clients that perhaps don't have consciousness that they've got this, internal essence, this eternal, was it eternal essence?
Yeah, eternal essence.
Okay, eternal essence, which is probably an everlasting description for our souls.
Yes.
For people that aren't thinking about that type of stuff, how do you help people?
I actually think that everyone has that inner knowing and that connection. And it's about what dials have been turned up. So sometimes with the inner voice and what we're listening to in our inner narrative, what's turned up is the ego or our fear or our programming. And so it's almost like the soul's voice is drowned out, but it's always present. And so if someone comes to me and they're pretty disconnected from their intuition, from their inner knowing, from their soul, their purpose here on the planet, it oftentimes means that the other dials are a little too loud, which might be rooted in trauma. It might be rooted in a lack of having support or an environment that's conducive to being that present and being that vulnerable. And so I create the space for people to process their trauma, to go back to the root system of where that fear was created, and then start to notice from that root where it's been recreated and reaffirmed through the manifestation of that pain again and again and again, which now that person may just think is their life. But actually we have the power to go back, to love on that version of ourselves that maybe formed the belief that they always fumble at the most important moments. They can go back to maybe that time they dropped the ball when they were 7 years old in their first game and start to heal that experience so that they can turn down that voice and start to turn up the voice of the soul that's always been present, but it's a still small voice and it's not super loud. The loud voices in our heads tend to be the fear, the ego, that you're not good enough, all these old narratives. So I really believe everyone has connection to their soul. That's who we truly are. And it's less about, if someone's really disconnected, it's actually less about forcing a connection with the soul and more about loving the really loud parts of them, the fear, the ego, the anxiety, the depression, so that they can be calm and start to lower their sound in your inner narrative, so you can actually hear your intuition, hear your soul, listen to your gut.
Okay, let's go. Let's take a few examples of those dials that are negative, past history. I call it tackling your thoughts. And your thoughts are your fears, are your doubts. It is the times when you've been harmed, the times when you messed up yourself and you haven't forgiven yourself for that. Kind of walk through why that keeps showing up at the worst times. In whether you're on stage, whether you're in the boardroom, whether you're in an interview, whether you're in the football field or basketball court or any other competition area.
External pressure reveals our internal homeostasis. So if internally we're unstable and we lack foundation, we're not secure in who we are, we're running on fumes, maybe we're not taking care of ourselves, we're letting that inner negative voice run wild, that external pressure will cause us to break down because there's no foundation. And so that's where we actually get to discover more of who we are in those high pressure moments. That's what's so exhilarating about being in the arena. But it's also very confronting, because when you get in the arena and you realize, wait, I haven't been being kind to myself. My inner narrative is so negative. I'm so scared of what people will think of me. I'm so scared of failure. I'm so scared of all these things. All this fear comes up to the surface. And now we blame the arena versus looking within, because the arena, the big game, those big moments are just an incredibly powerful mirror for us to see how authentically we are being ourselves. Because the truth of who we are is that we're designed to excel in those moments. We're designed to live fully and be present with our hearts open, to believe in ourselves, to move from love. And so for not really acting out of love for ourselves in those big moments, if we're living in doubt or hesitation, that's just a mirror that there's deeper inner work to be done. And it's actually not any sort of proof that that's not what you're supposed to do. Oftentimes we face the most obstacles on the path we're most called to. And that's because if you think about the journey of a soul and why, the deeper reason why we decide to come into this life and move through the ceremony of this life, the game of this life, is because we came here to grow. And so when we face those big moments and we fail, sometimes it's a redirection, maybe, but oftentimes the obstacle is the way through. And so those big failure moments are the universe, your higher self, God, the divine, trying to intercede and reveal to you that, like, work on your confidence. Start speaking affirmations over yourself, because this is what you're meant to do. And this obstacle is here to iron sharpens iron, like to shape you, to mold you into the person you're designed to be. So if you keep going and you see every obstacle as an opportunity for growth and almost an affirmation of growth, an affirmation of your path, I think that's what you see in the most successful people. It's not that they haven't failed. And it's not that they haven't failed big and on really big stages. It's that they don't see failure, or when they fall short in those big moments, as a no. They see it as an opportunity for growth.
That's outstanding, Rylee Christian. That's outstanding. So if there's somebody out there listening that is struggling with the big moments, the pressure moments, what are some basic things they can do, maybe daily, to redirect that inner narrative so that they can overcome and put behind themselves, which is what's stopping them?
Oftentimes when we're falling short in those big moments, we've actually been falling short in our process. And so if we get really honest with ourselves, we may not actually be showing up fully to our preparation. And so my encouragement is to look at how you're showing up daily, like you said, and make promises you can keep to yourself. Because every promise you keep to yourself builds confidence. Every time you set some lofty goal for yourself that you can't achieve, you're self-sabotaging, because you're going to fall short and reaffirm the story that you're not good enough, that you're not this enough, you're not that enough. So it's so important when you're working towards the big moments to show up as your higher self, as the person who has accomplished the thing, who's spoken on the stage, who's done the winning touchdown, who's like ran in the running touchdown, like to show up as that person in your process so that you can move through the obstacles in your preparation rather than in your performance. That's the really big key. And that can require subconscious reprogramming, because if the subconscious is really attached to the story of falling short, or the story of not good enough, or the story of second best, then it's going to be really hard in those big moments to counteract that. Because you can think of the subconscious as a ski slope. And so these thoughts that we developed really between 0 and 14, but really strongly 0 to 7, those are the ski slopes that there's all these grooves. It's like easy to go down. So it might not be a loving thought, but it's easier to think, I'm second best than I'm the starter. because that maybe hasn't been, that groove hasn't been gone down. So there's a lot of powder, maybe there's some trees. And so when you work with the subconscious and you start to do subconscious reprogramming, you open your awareness from your default settings, which are, those few grooves, which may or may not actually be serving you. And you decide that you're going to start going down these other pathways, which initially are going to feel like lies. If you've always been on the bench, saying that you're going to be in the game is going to initially feel like a lie. And this is where you can start to cultivate that belief in your preparation, in your visualization, meditation, and doing the healing work, the spiritual work, the mindset work, to start to face all that ick, all that cringe that comes up when you want to believe in yourself more than your subconscious does right now.
So in pro mindset, I call that rewriting your story or writing your story. Yeah. And writing is RIGHT. Write your story. And how do you explain why people perform consistent with the story that they tell themselves?
Well, our inner default network is developed in the mind from 0 to 7. So you can think of when you're a newborn baby, even when you're in the womb, you start to download programs of how to navigate through life. And so if you had parents who didn't believe in you, or maybe they didn't believe in themselves and they always played it safe and they ingrained safety into you, taking a risk is going to feel foreign because that's not the default settings. You can think of the mind like a computer, and in order to write a book, you need Microsoft Word, right? You can write a book through Excel, but it maybe is not as easy, or it doesn't flow. It's not the right program for the goal in mind. And so when we're working with the subconscious mind, it's about looking at what programs exist, because we think 90% of the same thoughts every single day, over and over and over again. And there's certain modalities to help turn this inner default network off. Microdosing, breath work. There's a lot of different modalities. Honestly, finding what works for you is always best. But where you can turn the mind off, turn the default network off, and then you start to imagine. It comes from creativity and imagination. You start to imagine a new timeline because it doesn't exist. Your reality was that you always play it safe, that the world is a dangerous place. And so as you're wanting to take risks, as you're wanting to put yourself out there, that doesn't exist in your brain. So going inward into deeper states of meditation and modalities that turn that inner default network off, now there's actually space to play. But that is also where there has to be enough foundation of clearing trauma and some of the deeper work so that you can be creative. Because if your nervous system is still super activated, and every time you go to take a risk or go to make a play, you start shaking or your nervous system is shutting down, then there might be some deeper layers that need to be worked out. But once you've put in that foundation and your nervous system is at least able to be neutral in the face of what you fear, now you can start to choose differently and create your reality from a space of imagination, which is what anyone who's done anything brilliant and exciting, anyone who's made one of those magical plays, it's all come from the imagination and from a nervous system that had the capacity to expand and hold the greatness, the magnitude of their manifestation.
Okay, I'm going to have you dissect a couple situations in sports. I was talking to somebody today in the NFL about a particular quarterback that was very entitled. And but for that entitlement, he would still be a starter in the NFL. But because of his entitlement, he's right now unsigned. Yeah. Why do people become entitled? Why? And a lot of athletes do. And how does that serve them? And how does that hurt them?
Yeah, it's a fine line between confidence and almost the delusion that's required to achieve greatness and entitlement. It's a very fine line. And when it goes out of balance and you shift into entitlement, it actually has a negative polarity. So someone who's confident, someone who's imagining their highest timeline, someone who's really going for it with a positive polarity is so magnetic. They give society hope. I mean, there's so many athletes that have pursued greatness at a delusional level that have inspired everyone around them. And then there's other people who've pursued that greatness, but from a negative polarity, and they almost like repel society. They repel their coaches. They repel their teammates because it's coming from a negative space. And if it's coming from a negative space, then it's about what they can get and not what they can give. And so anytime we're achieving greatness, we're wanting to make that play in a game, we're wanting to excel, win the Super Bowl, if it's not for a higher good or a greater purpose, if it's to fill a void within the ego of an unmet need or unmet validation, it's going to fall into a negative polarity, and then it's going to shift into entitlement. That confidence that you need to achieve anything is now going to be so repelling to people because it's not coming from your wholeness, it's coming from a fragmented part of the self. And now you're asking your reality to fill a need versus giving to everyone around you.
Okay, that's excellent. What about the situation where how you see yourself does not line up with your current circumstances? I see a lot, over the years, and even with your brothers from time to time, how they see themselves is not how the coaches see them. And the circumstances that they want are not consistent with the ones they're living in. How does our subconscious programming show up in a positive way and in a negative way when the circumstances don't align with your dream and your identity and your story?
So that's the initiation. No one who is where they want to be had every single person along the journey believe in them. They never had perfect circumstances. They went through storms, they went through valleys. And so it's about actually discovering true unwavering belief that's rooted in faith and not belief that's rooted in external circumstances. Because first there's thought, there's word, and then it materializes into form. So there's always going to be a delay from when we have a thought to when it actually comes into our reality. And this is the exact same with manifesting starting on the team. Maybe right now you're third string, but unless you're willing to hold the vision and speak into existence and expand your nervous system and work through any fear you have around failure, around being seen, you're not going to be able to create that. And while you're in that work and you've shifted that identity, it may still take some time for that shift to happen in the material realm, for your coaches to see you differently. I mean, it's the same thing even when you transform your body. They say you see results like 2-3 weeks before other people will start to notice that you've lost weight or muscle definition. It's just the nature of the universe. It's a law of the universe that it starts from within and then it manifests without. It's not the other way around. And when it is, you see oftentimes athletes that maybe achieve all these things because the world is affirming them, but it's not at all who they are. And either they like crash and burn or they like throw in the towel because it's like, wait, this isn't what I want. It's not coming from within me. And even though there's a lot of applause externally, it's not authentic and they can't hold it. And ultimately, that's where that statistic comes in of 80% of all NFL athletes 5 years after they're done playing professional football are broke, divorced, in jail. It's because their nervous system can't actually hold that elevated identity. And so there's a collapse when it's no longer affirmed by the external world.
Let's talk about fear and doubt. Fear is, there's danger, then there's fear. They're different.
Yeah.
And then doubt is really you about you. So how do you explain those concepts of fear and doubt?
All fear can be boiled down to a fear of death. So if your fear is of abandonment in relationships, you keep boiling it down, it's fear of death. Because primally, abandonment or being ostracized from your family, from your tribe, from your partner, equal death if you were alone in the woods. So fear is primal. And it takes time to start to create peace where there once was fear and to choose love where there once was fear. Because fear is a primal mechanism to keep us alive. And so it's not about ostracizing ourselves from our fear. It's about using our fear as a mirror of where we're not choosing love, where we're not choosing peace. And it's actually, when we're able to face our fears, that's why all the greatest people in the world have all faced their fears, have all gone through the fire of their fear. And on the other side, they have this great wisdom, this magnetism, this presence, this impact, because now they're so loving in that area of their life. And when it comes to doubt is a self-protective mechanism as well, but it's of the mind. I would say fear is more body-based. It's this primal fear of death. And doubt is a mechanism of the mind to keep you out of the arena. So doubt keeps you on the sidelines. And so when you're on the sidelines, while you may not be living your life to the fullest, while you may not be giving your gifts to the world in the way that you desire to, while you may not be fulfilling your purpose, you're not getting criticized. There's no haters. There's no feedback. And so the mind, the ego, gets to stay in a safe little bubble. Versus when you're in the arena, there's so much noise. There's so many projections. And so doubt and hesitation keep us on the sidelines. And that protects the ego from having to be bruised and bounced around by the opinions of others.
Okay. Let's talk about confidence busters. What are the things from your perspective that damage a person's confidence? I'll throw a couple out to you. One is perfectionism. And you try to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. So you kind of start thinking you're not as good as you thought you were because you're not perfect. But the standard probably should never be perfection. And I'll give you one more. Comparison. Is it more about being your best, or is it about barely being better than the other person so that you can play or you can perform or you can get the job or whatever the case may be?
I'll start with comparison, because comparison is a mechanism of the ego, and it's actually, again, quite primal, because there's a reason why we operate in tribes. Like human beings, we are communal beings, we're relational beings. And that's because our tribe keeps us safe. It's a part of our root chakra safety and one of our primal needs for belonging. And so comparison is quite innocent. I think if we look at all of these blocks, what we'll notice at the heart of it is innocence and the inner child making decisions about the self when they didn't know better. So oftentimes, if you think really far back, really deeply, maybe through some sort of like subconscious practice like yoga nidra or quantum healing or deep states of meditation, you might think that your lack of confidence in your comparison is rooted in the fact that your coach is pitting you against another player. But if you actually go back and back and back, it probably stems from early childhood and that first experience of comparison. And the first time that you became self-aware and you realized you were different, or you weren't as fast as this person, or the first time you were compared to someone. And that takes root. And then we continue to manifest that comparison in our lives until we forgive the version of ourselves that first believed the lie. We gotta kind of go down back into the spiral of time and space to that original event, that original trauma. Same with perfectionism. Like, when was the first time you felt like you fell short, or that you weren't allowed to be in your process? And maybe it was in art class in elementary school and you thought it was really beautiful. And then the teacher's like, that's not what I asked you to do. And now suddenly you're like, if I don't do it perfect, I'm going to get criticized. And so now your perfectionism may be rooted in a desire for approval from authority figures. There's so many different roots of all these things, but that could be one. And so some of the deeper work is taking radical responsibility for yourself as an adult, as a conscious being. rather than running these programs that were originally innocent, that came from choices you made about yourself, stories you told yourself, things you believed as a child that are no longer true, and running that program for your whole life. I mean, you'll watch people run victim programs their whole life around something that happened to them when they were really young. And it's our responsibility as people who desire to grow, achieve greatness, be a pro at whatever we're doing, to look at the root system of where these things were originally birthed and bring love to that version of ourselves. Love, compassion, and healing. Because oftentimes when we do that, our current circumstances shift quite easily. Sometimes we have to look to the past and really be loving, compassionate, be what we needed when we were younger. The voice, the nurturance, the compassion, the forgiveness, the reframe as us now, so that us in the present moment and continuing forward can operate from that elevated place.
Okay, let's shift and make an elevation game here. Let's move into what separates the performers that do their best in the biggest moments, that have the it factor, that are playmakers. They're the dudes, like in male sports. And it doesn't matter what the sport is. It doesn't matter what the competition is. They're the person that just seems to win. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody likes winners. Coaches like coaching winners. GMs like drafting winners. What is the distinction or archetypes of the people that do great things?
I think it comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, about the balance between the eternal essence and the ego, and really being so in alignment with what your soul came here to do, and then doing it dutifully. So you'll find people who are great, they approach their work with reverence. They're not flippant about anything. They're intentional. They're grateful. They approach things with passion and tenacity. And when we are operating from our authenticity and we're so committed to our mission and not to ourselves, that's when we really start to achieve greatness. If someone is committed to their comfort and to who they are, they might never take that risk because that threatens their homeostasis. But if you are committed to your mission and you know that you're here to be the greatest football player on the planet, or to win a Super Bowl, or to do this great thing, and you're in service, you act audaciously in service to your mission, that's when you achieve greatness. You have to have that deeper mission, that deeper why. And for those same reasons that we talked about entitlement, like channeling your confidence for the greater good. Because every time someone scales a mountain, every time someone accomplishes a great feat, it's on behalf of all humanity. And we notice that specifically in track, like when someone beats a record, now suddenly that opportunity is available to like a slew of people. Like when the mile was done in under 4 minutes, 5 minutes, it's like then all these people were able to accomplish the same thing. So we're designed to be way showers, leaders, messengers, inspiration to one another. And so when you're focused on the goal, the mission, now you get to be an inspiration. Now you get to be an icon, a public figure, because who you are is bigger than you. But if you're in devotion to you, the stages will always be smaller. And it's counterintuitive, maybe rather like counter-cultural, because we're really taught to, meet our basic needs, make sure everything's okay, versus the audacious, spiritual, faith-based way of moving in the world is actually being so focused on what you're here to do and trusting that the universe is going to provide everything you need to accomplish that mission, versus focusing on all the logistics and the how and micromanaging the universe. Really beautiful things, miraculous things happen when we are so focused on being of service to the greater mission, and we release the how, we release control and we surrender, then we can really be used in a bigger way.
In athletics, Rylee, they talk a lot about goals and success. How do you define those? How do those play into the subconscious? How do they apply into everything that you're talking about?
Goals give the life force energy that all of us have, but especially athletes who are moving their body, they're generating chi, life force energy. It gives it a direction to go. And so if you have no goal and you're aimless, think about like an energy field. And if there's no net, if there's no end zone, then there's no place for that energy to be directed to. Our goals give us an opportunity to direct our energy. And sometimes people get caught in perfectionism. They're scared to set goals because they're scared that when they get there, maybe that's not the goal that they want, or it's not going to be this or that. But the best thing we can do is set goals audaciously and fully chase them with full faith and confidence in ourselves. And if we get to that goal and we get redirected, it's going to feel amazing. You know, there might be an athlete, I think there's been multiple athletes that have pursued one sport fully and then redirected and chosen a completely different sport to go professional in. And so they wouldn't be in their second sport if they hadn't fully pursued to the fullest extent their goals within the first. And so it's non-linear, but goals actually are the way that we design our life and create our path, rather than fall into a track that's already been walked and already exists, and oftentimes won't actually lead us to the destination we desire.
What is success then? How do you define it?
I think it's self-defined. I really, really do. I think at the core, success is living in alignment with your core values and principles. It is being the embodiment of your mission and being of service to others, that your cup is so full that you're able to be overflowing, be a resource, be an abundant well of inspiration for others. I think that's the ultimate goal of success. And what that looks like for each person is going to be super different. And I think that's part of the beauty of choosing your own path and being connected to who you truly are, is that the illusions of societal success start to fall away, and the true definition of success that aligns with your soul starts to appear.
Wow. Okay, Rylee Krishnan, I think I'm only going to have like 2 more questions.
Okay.
Doing wonderful, by the way. One is, what does pro mindset mean to you?
I think pro mindset, it's been beautiful, by the way, to witness you discover this process. And as we were talking about success and like self-defining that, to me, your pursuit of pro mindset and your devotion to this concept and the chiseling away and finding what it truly is has been an amazing process to witness and very inspiring to me. And I think in so many ways, this is your dharma, this is your purpose, this is a culmination of all of the work that you did in your early career focused on others, and now you're distilling that wisdom and becoming a resource, a wellspring of inspiration for others. When it comes to pro mindset, I really see it as a framework, a process, and a way of being that aligns you with the highest expression of who you are and what you do. And self-defining your identity, setting goals, rewriting your narrative so that you can be a pro, you can excel, you can be the main character of your own life and your own destiny.
That's wonderful. Okay, if somebody out there is listening, they're like, man, I want to get in touch with you. How can people find you?
The best way to find me is on my website or on Instagram. Both are Rylee Domann. RyleeDomann.com or at Rylee Domann on Instagram.
Okay. Rylee Domann, thank you so much for being on Pro Mindset. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great time.
I
Thank you
did.
very much for your wisdom. And
Mm.
I think that the audience will probably realize that the smartest kid in the family is the one I'm talking to right now.
I want to thank you for tuning in to Pro Mindset Podcast. If you enjoyed the listen, please leave a 5-star rating. If the message was a vibration you connected with, and you have any friends, family, or colleagues who would benefit, then please share this episode with them. You can follow Pro Mindset Podcast on the following social media platforms: Instagram and YouTube, Pro Mindset Podcast; Twitter and Facebook, Pro Mindset Pod; LinkedIn, Pro Mindset. We will drop our shows, Pro Mindset Podcasts, every Wednesday morning, and we invite you to listen and subscribe. Also, don't hesitate to check out our archives to listen to previous shows. And finally, I encourage you to embrace a Pro Mindset truth from today's show. It just might be the key to unlock the pro inside you.